The office was humming with its usual rhythm. Keyboards clacking, phones ringing, voices muffled behind glass partitions. The sunlight filtered in through the blinds, casting long stripes across my desk. I was buried in spreadsheets, fingers aching from the endless number crunching, when the intercom buzzed on my desk. "Can you step into my office for a moment?" His voice, smooth and authoritative, crackled through the speaker. I straightened up immediately, glancing around as if someone might confirm I'd actually heard it. He rarely called me in directly. Our interactions were mostly through emails and occasional meetings. Swallowing my nerves, I stood, smoothing the front of my shirt before making my way down the hallway. His office was at the far end, a corner space that overlooked the city skyline. Floor-to-ceiling windows let in streams of light, illuminating the polished mahogany desk and the immaculate shelves lined with awards and framed certificates. I knocked softly. "Come in." I stepped inside, the door clicking shut behind me. He was standing by the window, his hands in his pockets, staring out at the bustling city below. When he turned, his expression softened into something that almost looked like a smile. "Busy day?" he asked, nodding toward my pile of work back at my desk. I forced a chuckle. "Same as usual." He motioned for me to sit, and I did, feeling the familiar tensions settle in my shoulders. There was always something about him. His sharp suits, the way he carried himself with such unshakable confidence. It made him seem almost untouchable. "I wanted to ask you something," he began, his gaze steady on mine. I nodded, waiting. "How do you feel about Italian?" My brow furrowed. "Italian?" "For dinner," he clarified, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "There's this place I've been meaning to try, and I was wondering if you'd join me." I blinked, surprised. "Dinner? Just the two of us?" My mind scrambled to piece together what was happening. This wasn't normal, not by any standard I knew. I could feel my cheeks heat up, but I kept my expression neutral, professional. "Oh, sure, that sounds nice," I managed to say, my voice steady despite the sudden fluttering in my chest. "Great." He leaned back in his chair, seemingly satisfied with my response. "I'll pick you up around 7. Is that all right?" I nodded, unable to trust my voice this time. He smiled, a genuine one that crinkled the edges of his eyes, a sight I wasn't used to. "You can go ahead and leave a bit early if you need to get ready," he added casually, almost as if it were an afterthought. "Thank you," I replied, standing a bit too quickly. My hands smoothed out my shirt again as I stepped back. "Oh, and—" His voice stopped me at the door. I turned back to see him watching me, one brow raised. "No need to be nervous. It's just dinner." I swallowed, nodding again before practically fleeing his office, my heart hammering against my ribs. Just dinner, right. Because invitations like that happen every day. Back at my desk, I barely heard the chaos of the office around me. My fingers moved over the keyboard, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying every word, every look. His eyes had lingered longer than usual. His tone had been softer, more personal. Or maybe I was just reading into it. I sighed, glancing at the clock. 4 hours until 7. When 5 o'clock finally rolled around, I didn't waste any time. I packed up my things and practically sprinted out of the office. At home, I tore through my closet, tossing shirts and pants onto my bed, rejecting each one as too casual, too formal, too something. Nothing felt right for a night like this, a night that felt like more than just dinner. I finally settled on a fitted navy blue shirt and black slacks, clean and crisp. I checked myself in the mirror more times than I cared to admit, running, my hands through my hair, splashing on cologne, adjusting my collar. By the time I was ready, the nerves had settled into a steady thrum beneath my skin. I wasn't sure what to expect tonight, but there was something in his eyes earlier, a flicker of something deeper, and I was ready to find out what it was. The restaurant was something straight out of a film. Soft lighting, candlelit tables, scattered across polished hardwood floors, and the gentle hum of jazz swirling through the air. It was the kind of place that felt too luxurious for me. Yet somehow, as I followed him inside, his hand lightly resting on my back, I felt fitting. A hostess, impeccably dressed and all smiles, led us to a private booth in the back corner. As I slid into the plush leather seat, I couldn't help but notice the way his hand lingered just a second longer on my shoulder before he took his place across from me. "Do you come here often?" I asked, attempting casual conversation to mask the flurry of nerves that had taken residence in my stomach. He leaned back, his eyes flickering around the room before returning to mine. "Only for special occasions?" I swallowed, unsure if I should ask what made tonight special. Before I could gather the nerve, the waiter appeared, filling our glasses with water and listing the specials in a well-practiced tone. He ordered confidently, "Bottle of wine, the house special," and I simply nodded along, trusting his choices. Once the waiter was gone, the silence settled in again, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was heavy, almost loaded, like we were both waiting for something to be said. "So," I began, breaking the silence, "what inspired this dinner invitation?" He chuckled, swirling his water glass. "Does there have to be a reason?" "I mean, you've never asked me out before," I replied, instantly regretting how direct that sounded. His eyebrow lifted, amusement dancing in his eyes. "I suppose you're right," he admitted, leaning forward slightly. "I've been meaning to get to know you better. I guess I finally decided to do something about it." The words hung between us, suspended and heavy. He made it sound so simple, like this was the most natural thing in the world, and maybe for him, it was. But for me, sitting across from my boss in a candlelit booth, sipping wine that probably cost more than my monthly groceries, it was anything but. The waiter returned with our appetizers, a beautiful arrangement of bruschetta and roasted vegetables. We dug in, the conversation flowing more easily with each sip of wine. It started safe, work projects, the latest company acquisitions, the chaos of deadlines, but then, almost naturally, it began to shift. "So, where did you grow up?" I asked, genuinely curious. His eyes softened. "Small town, a couple of hours from here. Grew up in a place where everyone knew everyone. Couldn't wait to get out." I laughed. I know the feeling. My hometown was the same. Couldn't even sneeze without the whole neighborhood talking about it. He chuckled, his eyes fixed on mine. "And now you're here, buried in spreadsheets. Living the dream," I replied with a grin. The conversation flowed from there. His childhood, my ambitions, the struggles and little victories that led us both to that very table. I shared stories of my early jobs, the odd gigs that got me through college, and he countered with tales of his first internships, the cutthroat nature of his climb up the corporate ladder. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, I realized that I was genuinely enjoying myself. His laugh was genuine, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and I found myself studying the way he leaned in when he spoke, his fingertips grazing my hand as he emphasized a point. It felt natural, effortless. Dessert came, an extravagant tiramisu that we split right down the middle. As we finished, a silence settled between us again, but this time it was different. His eyes held mine, unblinking, and I felt the tension coil tight, threading itself through the air like something tangible. He didn't move, neither did I. The jazz played on, smooth and unbothered, while the restaurant bustled quietly around us. But in that moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the room. He finally leaned back, exhaling softly. "I suppose I should get you home," he said, his voice softer now, almost a whisper. "Yeah," I replied, my own voice betraying the tension I felt. That would be good." He settled the bill with a wave of his hand, a quick signature, and we stepped back, out into the cool night air. His car, a sleek midnight black sedan, was parked just a few steps away. He opened the passenger door for me, his hand lightly grazing my back as I slid inside. The door closed with a soft click, and I was enveloped in leather and the faintest hint of his cologne. He rounded the front, slipping into the driver's seat with practiced ease. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the engine purring quietly beneath us. Finally, he broke the silence. "Did you have a good time?" I looked at him, his hands gripping the wheel, eyes focused straight ahead, but glancing at me from the corner of his gaze. "Yeah," I said honestly. "I did." He nodded, and the corner of his mouth turned up just slightly. Good. He shifted into drive, pulling away from the curb. The city lights blurred past the windows, and I sat back, heart pounding, wondering what tonight was really meant to be, and what might happen next. The city lights streaked by in a blur of neon and shadows, the glow from passing cars flickering across the dashboard. His car was immaculate, sleek leather seats, the faint scent of cedar, and something slightly sweet that lingered in the air. Soft jazz hummed from the speakers, just loud enough to fill the silence, but not enough to drown out the thrum of my pulse. For the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, but it was heavy, like there were words trapped between us, pressing against the windows, searching for a way out. His hands rested easily on the steering wheel, fingers tapping lightly to the rhythm of the music. I watched the city rush by, the glow of street lamps stretching out like golden threads along the pavement. "So," he said finally, his voice breaking through the fog of my thoughts. "Tell me something about you that I don't know." I blinked, turning to face him. His eyes stayed on the road, but there was a slight smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Something you don't know?" I echoed. He nodded. "We've worked together for over a year, but I feel like I don't know you." "Not really." I laughed softly, fiddling with the hem of my jacket. "I'm not that interesting," I said, half joking, half deflecting. "I find that hard to believe." His eyes flickered toward me briefly before focusing back on the road. "Come on, surprise me." I hesitated, thinking over the safe options versus the real ones. "I collect vintage vinyl records," I said finally. It felt innocuous enough, but still personal. He raised an eyebrow. "Vinyl? I wouldn't have guessed." I shrugged, relaxing a bit. "I like the imperfections. The scratches and pops makes it feel real." He nodded thoughtfully. "I get that." He paused before asking, "And relationships?" I nearly choked. "Relationships? Yes." He didn't look at me, but his voice had softened. "Anyone waiting for you at home?" The question lingered in the air, curling around the jazz notes like smoke. I shook my head slowly. "No, not for a while." He glanced at me then, just a quick flicker of his eyes. Their loss. Heat crept up my neck, and I looked away, pretending to be fascinated by the city skyline. I could feel his gaze linger on me before he turned back to the road. "What about you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Me?" His fingers tightened slightly on the wheel. "No one waiting for me either." The silence settled back in, but it was heavier now, more charged. I found myself tracing the curve of his jaw with my eyes, the way his hands moved with such confidence, the way he carried himself, like he was always in control. We pulled up to my apartment building before I realized we had even crossed half the city. The car idled, the engine purring softly beneath us. He didn't turn off the ignition. Neither of us moved. "Well," I started, reaching for the door handle, but my hand paused. He was watching me again, eyes lingering just a second too long. His hands rested on the wheel, fingers drumming once, twice. "Would you like to come back to mine? For a drink?" His voice was softer now, inviting, edged with something unspoken. My heart jumped in my chest, the thud of it echoing in my ears. I should have said no, I knew that much. But the way his eyes held mine, the way his voice dipped just slightly when he asked, it made the words catch in my throat. Yeah, I replied, the word tumbling out before I could stop it. "Yeah, I'd like that." His smile was slow, almost triumphant. He shifted the car back into gear, pulling away from the curb, the jazz still humming low and smooth between us. I settled back into the seat, glancing out the window as the city lights flashed by, my heart hammering with anticipation for whatever came next. The elevator ride to his penthouse was quiet, the kind of silence that was heavy with anticipation. He stood next to me, hands in his pockets, eyes straight ahead as the numbers ticked upward. I could feel the tension thrumming between us, unspoken, undeniable. When the doors slid open with a soft chime, I followed him out into a space that took my breath away. His apartment was sleek, modern, with polished hardwood floors and walls of glass that opened up to a sprawling view of the city skyline. The lights glittered against the night, stretching as far as the eye could see. "Wow," I murmured, stepping further inside. The place was immaculate, the kind of place you only see in magazines. He chuckled softly, setting his keys on the marble countertop. "Make yourself comfortable. I'll get us some wine." I nodded, wandering into the living area. The couch was expansive, a soft gray that looked impossibly comfortable. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city lights, casting the room in a soft glow. I sat down, my hands smoothing over the cushions, heart still thudding in my chest. He returned, moments later with 2 glasses of wine, handing me one before settling beside me. Not too close, but not far enough away for me to ignore the warmth radiating off him. 2 unexpected dinners, he said, raising his glass. His eyes met mine, and I clinked my glass against his. "To unexpected dinners," I echoed, taking a sip. The wine was smooth, expensive. I could taste the quality in every drop. We started talking again. At first, it was light. Work projects, mutual gripes about deadlines, the chaos of the office. But then, like the slow unfolding of petals, the conversation began to shift. His questions grew more personal, his gaze more intent. "What brought you here?" he asked, swirling his wine. "To the company, I mean." I shrugged, setting my glass on the coffee table. I needed a change. My last job wasn't fulfilling. "And is this one?" His eyes were steady on mine. I hesitated, then laughed, softly. More than I expected. He leaned back, his gaze never leaving my face. "You're good at what you do. I've noticed." Heat crept up my neck, and I ducked my head, flustered. "Thanks." The silence stretched again. Comfortable, this time. I watched him from the corner of my eye, how he swirled his wine glass, the way his fingers tapped lightly against the stem. It felt surreal, sitting there in his penthouse, sharing a bottle of wine, the world outside stretching out in lights and shadows. Then his voice softened, dropping just a notch. "I've wanted to get to know you better for a long time." I looked up, startled. His eyes were on mine, unblinking, honest. "You have?" He nodded, setting his glass down. "I just wasn't sure how." I swallowed hard, the tension rising like the tide. I always thought you kept your distance on purpose." A smile curved his lips. "Not on purpose." His eyes glimmered with something unspoken. "I just didn't want to make you uncomfortable." "You don't." The words came out before I could stop them. I bit my lip, glancing down at my hands, my heart pounding. "I mean, you never did." The silence that followed was charged, heavy. I could feel his gaze on me, studying, searching. When I finally looked back up, he was closer, just enough for me to catch the scent of his cologne, something warm and inviting. I took a shaky breath. I like being around you." His eyes softened, his hand moving, fingers brushing against mine. My breath caught, and I looked down at our hands, barely touching, but enough to send electricity racing up my arm. I half expected him to pull away, to brush it off as something casual, but he didn't. Instead, he leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. "I wasn't sure you felt the same." I met his gaze, my heart thudding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "I do." His hand covered mine fully then, warm and steady. My eyes dropped to where his fingers laced through mine. And when I looked back up, he was right there, closer than before, his eyes searching mine for any sign of hesitation. There wasn't any. He leaned in, and the world faded away. His lips brushed mine, soft at first, testing the waters. I didn't pull back. If anything, I leaned in, hands finding their way to his shoulders, fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. The kiss deepened, slow and electric, spreading warmth from my lips down to my fingertips. His hand moved to my cheek, cupping it, gently, his thumb brushing my skin with tender care. I felt his other arm wrap around my waist, pulling me just a bit closer. anchoring me to him as if afraid I might slip away. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless, his forehead resting against mine, our breaths mingling in the space between us. His eyes searched mine, a question lingering in their depths. But I didn't give him time to ask. I leaned in, closing the gap, and the tension that had been building for so long finally snapped, unraveling between us in waves of warmth and something far deeper. I woke up slowly, the sunlight streaming through the wide windows, casting soft golden patterns across the sheets. For a moment, I didn't recognize where I was, the high ceilings, the skyline stretching out like a postcard view. But then the memories flooded back, one by one, settling over me with a warmth that made me smile. His apartment, his bed, last night. I stretched beneath the sheets, blinking up at the ceiling as everything replayed in my mind. The dinner, the drive back, the way he had looked at me, like I was the only person in the room. I turned onto my side, half expecting him to be there, but the space beside me was empty, the sheets neatly folded back. For a split second, panic flared in my chest. Had he left? Had last night been some fleeting moment that meant nothing? But then I heard the soft clink of cups and the low hum of jazz floating in from the kitchen. I exhaled, letting the tension slip away as I pushed back the covers and padded out into the living room. He stood by the counter, already dressed, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, hair slightly mussed in a way that made him look impossibly handsome. A coffee pot bubbled on the counter, filling the room with its rich aroma. He glanced up when he saw me, and a smile broke across his face, genuine, unguarded. "Morning," he said, his voice warm and easy. "Morning." I tried to keep the blush from creeping up my cheeks. "You're up early," he shrugged, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. "Habit. Never could sleep in, even when I tried." He handed me a cup, his fingers brushing mine for the briefest second, sending a shiver up my arm. I took a sip, the heat spreading through my chest. He watched me for a moment, then nodded toward the small breakfast table by the window. "Sit." I made toast. I followed him over, settling into one of the chairs. The view from his penthouse was even more stunning in the daylight, endless buildings stretching toward the sky, the city just waking up below us. "Did you sleep well?" he asked, sliding a plate with toast and jam in front of me. "Yeah," I replied, surprised at how natural it felt. "I did." We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the kind that didn't need filling. I found myself stealing glances at him, how he spread butter with precise movements, how his eyes softened when he laughed at something small. It felt surreal and normal all at once. "So," he began, setting his cup down and leaning back, in his chair. "About last night." My heart skipped, fingers tightening around my coffee mug. "Yeah?" He hesitated for just a moment, then leaned forward, his gaze steady on mine. "It wasn't a mistake." His voice was low, serious. "I just want you to know that." My breath caught. "It wasn't?" He shook his head. "No, not even a little." His hand reached across the table, brushing against mine. Light, tentative, but full of promise. "I'd like to do it again. If you want." My heart thudded against my ribs, and I managed a nod, swallowing the knot in my throat. "Yeah, I want that." His smile returned, soft and genuine, and he squeezed my hand before pulling back. "Good." We finished breakfast with light conversation, work, weekend plans, harmless topics that masked the undercurrent of something far deeper. When the clock ticked closer to 9, I stood reluctantly, setting my cup down and glancing toward the door. "I should probably go. I don't want to be late." He walked me to the door, his hand finding the small of my back as he opened it. I turned to face him, the morning light spilling in from the hallway, and he paused, his eyes locked on mine. "Last night," he began, his voice softening. "I've wanted that for a long time." My breath hitched, and before I could think of something clever or casual to say, he leaned in, brushing his lips softly against mine. It was gentle, lingering, as if he were trying to memorize the feeling. When he pulled back, I was dizzy, but I held his gaze. Me too. His hand slipped from mine as I stepped back into the hallway, the door still slightly ajar. "See you at the office?" he asked, a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Yeah," I replied, a smile spreading across my face. "See you there." He watched me walk down the hallway before the door finally clicked shut, and I stood there for a moment, heart still pounding, replaying every second. I couldn't hide the smile that crept up my face, even if I tried. This was just the beginning. I could feel it. The office felt different, not in any obvious way. Phones still rang, keyboards still clattered, and colleagues moved through their daily routines with the same hurried efficiency. But for me, everything had changed. I settled back into my chair, logging into my computer, the screen flickering to life as if it hadn't missed me at all. My fingers hovered over the keys, but my mind wasn't on the emails or the spreadsheets. It was still back in his penthouse, wrapped up in the memory of soft light and warm touches. I glanced up toward his office, glass walls, blinds half drawn, a view of the entire floor. He was at his desk, focused on a stack of paperwork, brow furrowed in concentration. It was strange seeing him like that now, knowing what it felt like to be close to him, to feel his hands in my hair, his breath against my skin. As if he felt my gaze, he looked up, catching my eyes through the glass. For a moment, neither of us moved. A slow smile curled at the edge of his lips, just enough for me to notice, but not enough for anyone else to suspect. I bit back my own grin, turning back to my screen before anyone saw. But the glances didn't stop. Throughout the day, I'd catch his gaze during meetings, a flicker of amusement in his eyes when I stumbled over my words, a lingering look when I passed by his office. It was subtle, perfectly hidden behind professionalism, but I felt it. I felt every second of it. Lunchtime came and went, and I buried myself in reports and client calls, trying to keep my head down, to act normal. But I could feel him there, just a floor above me, and the memory of his touch kept pulling me back. By the time the clock struck 5, I had barely made a dent in my workload. I was packing up, shoving files into my drawer, when his voice crackled. Over the intercom on my desk. "Can you stop by my office before you head out?" His voice was smooth, casual. "Of course," I replied, my heart already picking up its pace. I straightened my shirt, smoothing down the wrinkles before walking to his office. The blinds were drawn fully now, the door slightly ajar. I knocked softly, and he looked up, waving me in. "Close the door, would you?" he asked, his tone light. I did as he asked, the click of the lock far louder than I expected. I turned, back to him, and he was leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes sparkling with something I couldn't quite place. "How was your first day back?" he asked, the hint of a smile playing on his lips. I couldn't help but grin. "Different." He chuckled, leaning forward, elbows resting on his desk. "Good different?" "Very." He nodded, his gaze steady on mine. "I'm glad to hear that." He paused, fingers tapping lightly on the polished wood. "I was thinking, if you're not too tired from all the paperwork, maybe you'd like to go out again? No pretense this time. Just us." My heart skipped, the air catching in my throat. "Yeah," I managed, my voice softer than I intended. "I'd like that." "Good," he said, and his smile grew wider, more relaxed. "I'll pick you up at 7? I nodded, the smile on my face refusing to fade. 7 works. I turned to leave, my hand brushing the doorknob when his voice stopped me. "Oh, and," he began, and I turned back to face him. His eyes were warm, lingering just a bit longer than necessary. "Last night, that wasn't the end. Not even close." My breath caught and I managed a nod. "I didn't think it was." His gaze softened, and for a moment, I almost forgot where I was. Just the two of us in his office, the world outside blurred and distant. Finally, I turned the handle, stepping back out into the hallway, the familiar hum of the office washing over me. As I walked back to my desk, I could feel his eyes on me, following me through the glass, a look that promised more. So much more. And for the first time in a long while, I felt it too.